Buying bubbles can be pretty confusing if you don't really know what you're looking at. You got Cava, Champagne, Prosecco, and a bunch of labels and prices, and usually you just pick one up and hope for the best. Right now, I want to fix that. We're going to take a look at Champagne, Prosecco, Cava, and a couple other styles, and we're going to see what sets them apart from one another. The goal here is that next time you go into the store to buy yourself a bottle of bubbles, you'll know exactly what you're buying and exactly what's in that bottle before you make your purchase. I'm sure you've been told 1,000 times that champagne's not sparkling wine. It has to come from a specific region in France or something to that effect. And while that is true, that's not a lie, there's a lot more to it than just that. Now, before I get further into it, I would really love it if you hit the like button, subscribe, maybe diddle the bell a little bit, because we're trying to bring better wines at better prices to more people all across the country, and doing that really helps us out. First, let's take a look at Champagne and what makes it special. So Champagne is a region in northeast France. It's a relatively cool climate historically, although the last couple of years it has been warming up a little bit. In Champagne, there's three main grapes that are making up all the wines. You're looking at Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. The reason that this region is so special and makes such spectacular sparkling wines comes down to a combination of a few things, but soil and those cool climate temperatures are two of the main factors. So first, let's talk about the soil. What you're looking at here is a cross-section of ground with some roots growing deep down into the soil. Now you'll notice that this is really lightly colored soil, and that's because it's made up of chalk. Now chalk is uber porous, which means that it has great drainage. You don't wind up with really bogged down waterlogged soils like you might in a region that's full of clay. Now while chalk soils do allow for great drainage, they also hold on to a lot of water so that the vines don't get too thirsty during dry periods. It's not just the porosity that makes chalk great for the region of Champagne though. Because this soil is so bright white, it's reflecting the sun back up onto the canopy above. What this does is it helps the grapes ripen. Being in such a cool climate, it definitely can slow down the ripening process. And that's good because it preserves a lot of acidity, which you definitely experience in the wines of Champagne. But if your grapes aren't getting ripe enough, you're not getting enough sugar to support fermentation, and you're just, in the end, not getting wine. That's why when you're thinking about Champagne as a region, the soil and the climate come together to create something so special. Now, another uber important factor when it comes to Champagne is the production method. Champagne is often considered one of the first places in the world, if not the first, that ever made sparkling wines. Originally, it happened by accident, but nowadays they've got it down to a science. Usually, you'll hear this called the traditional method. The first step in the traditional method is harvesting the grapes, obviously. Next, what they do is they actually make still wines. They'll have, say, a vat of Chardonnay, a vat of Pinot Noir, and a vat of Pinot Meunier. When you get to the next step, that's when they blend these together to create their house style or whatever they're trying to achieve here. Blended still wine goes into a bottle, then they're adding sugar and yeast and capping it off. What this does is it starts what's called secondary fermentation. Having this secondary fermentation go on in the bottle while it's capped off puts the bottles under a lot of pressure. That pressure is caused by the CO2 that's naturally built up by fermentation. And what happens there is that because it's got nowhere to go, it dissolves into the wine. And that's how you get those bubbles. Now, this is really important because the bubbles of Champagne are super fine. And when you're looking at a glass of Champagne, you'll notice that they're rising from pretty much the center of the glass. They're not sticking to the walls or anything like that. You kind of see more of a up and around type of movement to the bubbles. That's how you know that the sparkling wine you're drinking was crafted with the traditional method. Once that secondary fermentation is done, the yeast will die and precipitate out, and that's what we call the lees. The lees will stay in the bottle, and what they do with these bottles is they put them in what's called a riddling rack. That keeps the bottles at an angle upside down and allows for those lees to sit in the bottle and all stay in one spot. Now, while those bottles are in the riddling rack, somebody has the super dangerous job of going down into the cellar and turning them like a quarter turn every so often. I say it's super dangerous because these bottles are under a lot of pressure, and it's literally somebody handling these things. Historically, it's a super dangerous job, and you can Google it if you want to learn more about that, but they can explode. I think nowadays they got a lot more automated processes for this, but traditionally it really was all done by hand. The lees are super important to the flavor profile of Champagne. They impart like yeasty, bready flavors and aromatics, which is a quintessential part of a Champagne experience. Once the winemaker decides the time is right, they go into what's called the disgorgement process. Now what they do here is they take the bottles, they turn them upside down, and they super cool them so that all that yeast is concentrated right at the mouth of the bottle and is frozen. The next step is that they pop the cap off and the yeast gets pushed out by the force of the CO2 built up behind it. Then you put your thumb over the mouth of that bottle and it goes on to the part of the process where they label and cork everything. This is a really labor-intensive process that's not really unique to the Champagne region anymore, but originally was. And because this process is so labor-intensive and time-consuming, it definitely adds to the price that you're paying when it comes to buying champagne. A lot of the time when people buy champagne, they're kind of just going with the big names. You know, Moet, Veuve. These are the names that you see in grocery stores across the country and in every wine and spirits shop that you walk into. Are these my favorite though? Not quite. One of my favorite values when it comes to champagne is Nicolas Fouliat. They make a great Brut and a great Brut Rosé that they're pretty affordable as far as champagnes go. Both of these wines are delicious and we have both of them available pretty much year round, so these are great options for you anytime you need a bottle of champagne. If you do want to go higher end, there's plenty of options out there for you as well. Dom Perignon, definitely going to be the most popular of those and the most widely known, but you could also go with something like Le Belle Epoque Rosé if you want to go for rosé bubbles, or if you really want to get refined and elegant, I would say Paul Roger, Winston Churchill, that's awesome stuff. Now, the thing about this really high-end champagne is that they don't make it every year. They tend to only make these bottles when the conditions of that vintage are what they consider perfect. That and the other factors that go into the production that we just went over really do drive the price up, but in my eyes, these bottles can be absolutely worth it if the time is right. While champagne is the place where the traditional method was born, it's not the only place that they're doing it. Franciacorta in Italy is what I would consider to be Italy's response to champagne. So in Franciacorta, they often are using the same three main grapes as champagne, and they're also using the traditional method. It's up in northern Italy, so it is a cooler climate, not quite as cool as champagne historically is, but it's pretty close. Pizzini Franciacorta is probably my #1 pick for a Franciacorta this year. It's delicious stuff, and it definitely rivals or beats out a lot of champagnes in that lower tier price point when it comes to champagne. If you do want to try traditional method bubbles, and you don't want to spend 30, 40, 50, or way more dollars, then Spain would be the best place to go. A lot of people have already had traditional method bubbles and have no clue because Cava is traditional method. Cava is Spain's value-driven sparkling wines. Cava comes from a warmer region and is made using the traditional grapes of the area, so you wind up with much more ripe and fruit-forward style of traditional method bubbles than you do in Franciacorta or Champagne. They also tend to spend a lot less time aging their wines on the lees because they want that fruitier, fresher, more fun style of bubbles. Now, you can get great Cava for like $10 a lot of the time. A lot of people have already had Frisinet or Cristalino, but my pick year after year, especially when it comes to New Year's Eve, is Campo Viejo. This is great Cava, and I always buy like a half a case so that I can play with my saber and pop some bottles out in the front yard. Campo Viejo Cava is not just good for sabering, it's also great to drink, and that's the other reason that I buy it so often. For a long time, Cava was the only real sparkling wine that you could get if you wanted Spanish bubbles. But a handful of years ago, a couple families came together in Rioja and they changed that. If you don't know, Spain is one of the most strict countries on the planet when it comes to their wine laws. And in Rioja, they had to make bubbles and label it Cava, even though they felt like they were making a product that could rival champagne. A handful of years back, the 5 big families in Rioja got together and they lobbied the Spanish government to allow them to make special Rioja sparkling wines. It took them a couple years to convince the Spanish government to allow for them to do it, but nowadays you can get something called Sparkling Rioja when previously you could only get Cava. And if you went to one of these wineries and told them that you loved their Cava, they definitely would look at you sideways. One, because their wines are generally a lot more complex than the Cavas you're seeing, due to the fact that legally they have to age on the lees for at least 15 months. And 2, because they worked so hard at getting this classification legalized. A great example of this new sparkling Rioja style is Carlos Ceres. Carlos Ceres makes some really good, just regular old red Riojas, but their sparkling Rioja is awesome. I like to tell people that it's everything Moet wishes it could be. It has that really bright tropical fruit note, and it also has that really nice, like, brioche kind of yeastiness underneath. It's one of my favorite bottles of bubbles that we carry, especially when you think about the fact that it's only like 20 bucks. So if you're looking to try some traditional method bubbles and you don't quite want to go to champagne prices and you like Moet, Carlos Ceres is the perfect option for you this year, I think. Obviously, those aren't the only types of sparkling wine. In fact, the most popular sparkling wine in the world isn't even made with the traditional method. The most popular wine in the world uses what's called the Charmat method. And of course, I'm talking about Prosecco. Prosecco is made in Veneto, Italy, and it uses a lot of similar tactics when it comes to the winemaking process, but there's one big difference that sets it apart and makes it its own thing. The way that the Charmat method differs from the traditional method is their use of stainless steel tanks for secondary fermentation. Instead of doing that secondary fermentation in bottle, they're doing it in pressurized stainless steel tanks. This is obviously a lot more efficient. You don't have to worry about having space for riddling racks or somebody to go down and turn the bottles. And it also allows the winemaker to have a little bit more control over how quickly everything's done. Because this is so much more efficient, that brings the price down. And then the price also comes down because they're not doing a lot of aging with Prosecco. These wines are meant to be young, fruity, fresh, and easy to drink. So they're bottling pretty quickly once that secondary fermentation settles down. You're not getting all that breadiness, and you're also not getting the higher price point from them waiting around or doing all the extra work. It is a totally different style of sparkling wine, and it's just as valid, but it's known mostly for those cheap, easy-to-drink mimosa mixer type of things. Now, one of the best values when it comes to Prosecco is La Vostra. I'd put it right up against La Marca or Mianetto any day of the week, and you're saving a few bucks when you buy a bottle of La Vostra instead of those other two. In fact, La Vostra makes one of my favorite rosé Proseccos. Their regular Prosecco is great too, but I'm a big fan of their rosé. Just because everybody knows those value-driven brands doesn't mean that that's all that they make when it comes to Prosecco. As a matter of fact, my favorite producer of Prosecco is Bissol. They make a great line of value-driven Proseccos called JO. They range from like 11 bucks up to 20, maybe a little bit more than that. But their number one bottling, if you ask me, is their Cartese Prosecco. Cartese is essentially Prosecco's Grand Cru hillside. This is a tiny area that has calcareous and mineral-rich soils that lead to some serious complexity. And the hills are really sloped, so you can't get machinery up in there, and everything's done by hand. And just by the nature of sending people up to pick grapes by hand, they're a little bit more careful about what they're picking and when, and you wind up with higher quality Proseccos. If you're looking for crowd-pleasing, budget-friendly bubbles for a New Year's Eve party or a bridal shower or anything like that, Prosecco is usually the way to go. Now, while those two are the most popular styles and methods when it comes to making sparkling wine, there's one more that's been gaining a lot of popularity, especially in those wine nerd circles. That's going to be Prosecco and Champagne's funky cousin, the pet-nat. Pet-nats differ from both of those because it only ferments once. The way they do this is they start fermentation outside of the bottle, and during primary fermentation, they bottle it, cap it, and leave it. It never gets opened again until you bring a bottle home and start to drink it. Because they do it like this, you wind up with sediment in the bottle, you wind up with much more funky, fun flavor profiles and aromatics, and a really unique drinking experience, especially if you've never had one before. Pet-nats tend to be great for people that love sour beer. They have more like wild cider and funky aromatics to them. Though they are still fresh and fruity, there's definitely more just funk to them. It's kind of hard to describe if you've never had one. And if you haven't, I definitely suggest picking one up. As a matter of fact, Field Recording Salad Days is a perfect example of a pet-nat. It's unfiltered, unfined, a little bit funky and a little bit fresh, and just a really fun bottle to drink. Pet-nats are the perfect bottles to buy if you're going to a party full of wine nerds or young sour beer drinkers or something like that. They're just really fun wines. I love them, and they tend to not be too expensive. Usually you're seeing them for under 25 bucks, although they can get up there just like anything else. Of course, there's some other options. California makes some great sparkling wines, and so does New York, and plenty of other places around the world. But those are the ones that I think are really important to know because they are all different from one another and unique. And when you're looking at a giant section full of bubbles like we have, it can get a little confusing. So I really do hope that if you watch this video, it makes it easier the next time you walk into a store and pick out some bubbles to know exactly what you're buying and exactly what you want out of that bottle. If you'd like to check out any of the wines that I talked about in this video, hit the link down in the description. I got a link there that'll bring you right to a page with every single one of them listed. And not only are they listed, but you can buy them right there and have them shipped to your front door. If you still need recommendations for wine after this, check out my video from last week where I listed my top 10 wines under 50 bucks that'll impress even the most discerning wine snobs. The world of wine has a lot to explore, so if there's any region, style, grape, or anything like that that you'd like to see me dive deeper into, leave a comment down below and let me know, because I love exploring new topics just as much as I like explaining them. So that's going to be all for me this week, and I'll see you next week with God knows what. Adios.
Champagne to the corner store score, whatever you're drinking, they've got your part. It's the best damn booze born in New York's heart. Empire wine and liquor where the good folks meet. Grab a glass and taste that